In 1993, you started working as a college professor, which is a profession that is typically more commonly linked with being a humble academic servant than being a launchpad for international stardom. But now, here we are, the year is 2022, and you are a world-famous academic, which in itself sounds almost paradoxical. How did you become so famous, and how has it affected you as a person?
Well, my courses were always extremely popular. Isn't the right way of characterizing them. My courses, particularly my Maps of Meaning course, which was predicated on my first book, which took me about 15 years to write, it had a big effect on my students. The most typical response in the student evaluations, well, there were two of them. One was, this course changed the way I looked at everything, which is quite a claim.
Yeah.
Or this was the most meaningful course I took at university. And another comment often was, I'm trying to talk to the people around me about what I'm learning in this course, but I can't generate the language because what I was teaching was so different from everything else that my students was encountering, like really qualitatively different. And so that was the case at Harvard. And then it was the case at the University of Toronto. It was even the case at McGill, because when I was a graduate student there, I ran a seminar that a lot of other graduate students attended, which was not standard practice, by the way. And I could see already the effect that the ideas that I was disseminating was having on people. And I thought when I published Maps of Meaning, I thought, everyone's going to think this way in 50 years. And that's a preposterous thought, right? Especially for an academic tome that's very dense and very unlikely to have popular distribution, partly because of its denseness and, well, because it just doesn't happen to academic books. But I knew, and it wasn't because these were my ideas. In many ways, they're not my ideas at all. Perhaps in the most fundamental ways, they're very, very, very old ideas. But I read enough of the great works of the great clinicians to have that tremendous advantage, and then was able to make a synthesis of that across thinkers that was very compelling to people, one that was focused on issues of meaning, especially meaning in the face of suffering. And that's when the issue of meaning becomes most crucial. And so I could see the effect that it was having on my students. And then one of the consequences of that was a small TV station, TV Ontario, publicly funded TV station, did a series on my classes, which was also basically unheard of, 13 half-an-hour summaries of a longer 40-hour course. And that attracted a reasonable amount of attention. And at about the same time, I started playing with YouTube and put my lectures online, a lot of them, hundreds of hours of them. And that started to attract a fair bit of attention too.
How did you get that idea?
Well,
put it on YouTube.
Well, I was very interested in YouTube. When I started playing with it, it was mostly cat videos, but I could see right away that there was something revolutionary about, not YouTube specifically, but about the ability to permanently archive the spoken word. That's as big a revolution as the book, except it's even more revolutionary because audio recording in particular might be more revolutionary than the book. Lots of people can listen who can't read. Reading is it's a minority occupation. Very few people buy books. A very small percentage of the population buys books. Even a smaller percentage reads the books they buy, particularly true for difficult nonfiction. And that also tends to skew male. But listening is a whole different issue because you can listen, everyone can listen virtually. And you can listen while you do other things, which is also a huge technological transformation. So I was very curious about YouTube, and I learned long ago that the only way to sate your curiosity about something was to wrestle with it in a hands-on manner, to actually start to use the technology and to play with it. And so I started to play with YouTube, and that was very useful, partly because useful and not so useful. I already had been on YouTube a few years when I made my first foray into political commentary. with Bill C-16 in Canada, which was a law mandating compelled speech.
Right.
And it happened to focus on the issue of trans pronouns, of all the preposterous things. And I had already been experimenting with YouTube, and I came down to the table and told my wife and my son that I was going to make some videos commenting on this Bill C-16. And they said, go ahead, you've been talking about these things, well, just make a video and what can happen? Yeah. And so I did. I put 3 videos up, one about the Bill C-16 and so 2 about Bill C-16 and associated issues, and 1 about the university's diversity, inclusivity, and equity policies. And that just caused an explosion.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, well, see, part of the reason that it caused an explosion was that it wasn't that easy to take me out, because all the material I had put on YouTube at that point meant virtually every single thing I'd ever said to students in my entire academic history was documented and public, literally hundreds of hours, all the way back to 93 at Harvard. And so when the mob came for me with all the accusations that they brandish, Nazi,
transphobe,
Nazi particularly, it was utterly preposterous because, although sticky, because I'd actually spent my whole career literally trying to inoculate people against ideologies like the Nazi ideology. So not only was it not true, it was a specific kind of untruth, which is anti-truth. So if you're a good liar, you deviate in a minor way from the truth, right? And that's the easiest way to slide a lie forward. But if you're a Luciferian liar, you pronounce the opposite of what is the case. And the idea that I was a Nazi sympathizer, people would go look at my lectures and they'd think, well, I don't know what he is, but obviously he's not a Nazi sympathizer by any stretch of the imagination in any possible way, or an admirer of the equally bloody and devious and demented and appalling communist regimes, which are still waving their blandishments about in the West, aided and abetted by idiot intellectuals of every stripe and the universities at large. And so it wasn't so easy to take me out, as it turned out.